Sacramento, is it not true? Move there or just go for a visit? Yeah. Oh yeah, how old? Hello.
35.
Children? Married? One children?
She probably does.
One marriage?
She probably does.
Anyone in this class have a brother? How old is he, Jesse?
My older brother is 56. I have a younger brother who's 48.
48 is good? Is he married?
Both of them are.
Well, does he want like another wife?
He used to tell me that he's very afraid of his wife.
Oh, that doesn't work.
It's unfortunate.
Well, you have to be scared of women. That's the only way a marriage works. Kendra, what's going on? Anything? You have a class today. What are you teaching? Oh, religions. What are you guys covering today? Gilgamesh. Yeah, that's a nice story. There's this version of Gilgamesh on YouTube. I'm not quite sure. Sometimes I can't even find it, but the guy has such a nice voice as he goes through the story. Yeah.
When was it written roughly? Yeah.
Could be a bit more specific.
8,000, 6,000?
Cassie, would you know?
I think Kendra's right. I'm not sure. I think they say something like 2,000. Yeah. 2,000, 2,500.
But some of the stories that it pulls from go
Further back.
very.
Do you know Sarah? Does your sister, who's 35, looking for a husband and a few children, does she know?
Probably not.
You want to call her? We can talk to her.
If I call her, she probably won't pick up.
Does she asleep?
No, I think she's at work.
What's she do?
Like insurance claims, health insurance claims.
Health, he said?
Yeah.
Does she fib?
No.
Useless.
Yeah. It's all recorded.
Well, I could tell her like a false story.
I mean, stories don't really get you too far in the healthcare industry.
That's true.
We'll always find a way around.
Oh yeah.
Whatever system is created.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really fascinating.
That's true.
There's probably a way.
Yeah.
Leah, is there anything you want to talk about today? You want to talk about Gilgamesh? We have two very, very proficient instructors here, Cassie and Kendra. You can ask them questions about Gilgamesh if you wish.
I wasn't aware until fairly recently how much the Bible is constructed from like pieces here and there from other older stories. And are you aware of any particular stories that influence the Bible from Gilgamesh?
There's definitely a lot of themes that we see repeated. There's a flood.
Right. Exactly.
There's a woman. There are dreams.
Cassie, anything?
I read it all.
Yeah, Leah. You two tricksters, yeah.
What is the symbolic importance of food in ancient ethics? I don't know if I'm recalling it correctly, but after they defeated the bull, didn't Hinata,
Defeated who?
after they defeated the bull,
Oh, the bull of heaven.
yeah,
Yeah.
Hinata rewarded them with like a cake or, not a cake, it was like a meat pie or something.
I think it was tiramisu. I'm sorry.
But in a lot of myths, there is, I guess, a lot of hospitality and a lot of food. And what is the symbolic nature of that? And why is it that so many modern cultures seem to have lost that aspect of like hospitality and food?
Cassie?
Why we've lost.
Can I just, a couple of notes here? Is that okay? I haven't been to the Arab countries. I can only speak of what I experienced in Iran. Fridays, especially Fridays, we would go to the mosque. And there was a guy, sitting on the throne somewhere and giving a sermon for 2, 3, 4 hours. Then tea would be served with some dates while you're listening to the sermon. And then huge platters of food would be brought forth, maybe 50 of them. And about maybe 6 to 10 people would sit in a circle with plates and spoons and forks, and some people with their hands. They would just eat. And I think if you were to live in a culture that kind of conditions you in that way, if you go to some strange place you've never been before, and all of a sudden food is given to you, add to it that there is this theme that's been in the culture for a long, long time, which is guests are friends of God. Whether or not you believe in God, that's a different matter. But that's the cultural narrative. And so the moment someone knocks on your door, even to this day, if someone knocks on my door, I say, please come in. It took me a long time, and I was told by many people, the people you're inviting they could be criminals, they could be this, they could be that. So don't just invite anyone in. And so you realize that, most of the things that human beings long for, like friendship and hospitality and all those things, Leah, it's very difficult to teach people those things if they've lost those stories. They have to really be in your DNA. Hello, Mirna. So, those are nice shoes, Mirna. Those shoes match your shirt. You're very colorful. Good for you. Yeah, so I suppose to some extent the question should be, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm in your class on Mondays and Wednesdays. I want to make a confession. I'm not a very hospitable person. I don't talk to people. I don't email people, text people. I desperately want to, but I just don't. When they see me eat my food, I don't offer them any. I'm very selfish. And I was wondering if there's a way I can overcome those bad habits, if you categorize them as bad. Now that becomes a really good question, because it shows that there is something about you that stands outside of you, looks at this particular person and says, well, the food is nice, but eating by yourself is not nice. You know, you're lonely. It's nice to have friendships, but for some strange reason, there are things inside you that obstacles that particular desire. Is there a way to overcome it? Are there coaches out there that do this in a very organic way? So you look at certain parts of Africa, Mexico, India, Pakistan, Iran, you say, wow, you know, or maybe in this, you know, in the South, here in America, that these people, you know, very organically, very naturally, someone knocks on the door and they're invited in, you know, they hang out for the next 5, 6, 10 hours. No one suffers from the sort of loneliness that people here suffer from. Is there a way I can overcome some of my bad habits? And what you're really asking is, I have some information, but I want this information to be hands-on. You know, if there is a way I can change myself from being A to becoming that. I just don't know if that is possible. Hello. I mean, it's possible. It just takes a lot of work. Have you seen the refugee camps in Palestine, or even here downtown Oakland? Homeless folks. Their tents are very, very close together. Now, you should go to certain parts in Piedmont, for example, and look at the houses. They're mansions, and they're like on 5-acre lots. You need to kind of sit back and ask, why is that so? You know, that you have poor people whose tents are virtually like touching each other, whereas these people who are very privileged, they live so far from one another. It's something we've talked about many times. You know, Leah, if you're poor emotionally, in the sense that you're rich emotionally, there are lots of things happening inside you, and you want to share them. You know, you're going to look at Jesse and say, Jesse, do you have a few minutes after class? I can buy you a cup of coffee, I just need to talk. And you realize that the richness of your emotional world, but the poverty of expressing that emotional world connects you to Jesse. And that poverty and sitting together having a cup of coffee for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 hours creates what we call friendship. But the richness of emotions, poverty of communication, the tragedy of experience, in the sense that you've tried to express what lived inside you, but it fell on deaf ears. You can't just walk away from the whole thing. And despite your desire to create friendship, something about you says no. And so, despite the richness of your emotions, it becomes a very solitary life. And then that eventually turns into depression. There's always a way out, it's just difficult. Right, Mirna? Can I tell you a story? When I was in Iran, this was 19... Good morning. 1980, I think, or 81 or something. We were in the streets demonstrating. It wasn't. It was 1979. And then all of a sudden, soldiers, opened fire. And we all ran in different directions. My nephew, Reza, out of desperation, he knocked on this door. And the woman, without asking his name, any questions about what's going on, just grabbed him by the hair and pulled him inside and shut the door. And it happens all the time. I mean, here, that when times are chaotic and people are desperate, something about us just changes. Individual trauma keeps you isolated, but cultural trauma, like a war, famine, flood, the Gilgamesh stuff, it just brings people together. Isn't that true, Mirna? Good to see you, Kendra. Good luck with Gilgamesh. Speaking of Gilgamesh, you know what the name means, Leah? If my research is right, an old man who wants to become young. You know, you're 5, your parents never treated you right. By the time you're like 10, all these emotions inside you, you've become so ancient. These emotions slapped you around for the past like 10 years. You never really had a decent childhood. All the books you read, all the conversations you have, all the friends you have, all the therapists you see, all the movies you watch, they only have one function: to remove the abuse and to recreate and reinvent you. An old person who desires to be young. Anyways, you ever been to chiropractor? It's like your body is just not working. You've been to. We go there for one reason. Life has just made us old and, stiff, like 2x4s. You just go there in a shop so that this person can bring the youth back. That's the story of Gilgamesh, really. A guy who just comes to realize that life makes it 2x4 of everyone. And he just wants to be a blade of grass, bending here, bending there, flexible. Can I tell you another story, Leah? I had a student some years ago. Is that coffee? Tea? Black? I'm sure it's very good. Sugar?
Honey.
Let me apologize for this class. I feel like I need to apologize every day. I know you guys signed up for like a ethics class. I just don't know what to talk about, Mirna. Nothing works. It's like Viagra. So, what was I going to say?
Story about
Oh, yeah. He was this lost, confused little kid. He's a 20-some-year-old. He had been to my classes many times, but at a certain point, after like being around me and my classes for like 2-3 years, he says, Amir, I think I want to do like philosophy. So he gets his bachelor's and then master's in philosophy, humanities, and then he says, I think I want to go to Iran. For what? I ask him. I want to go to Iran and get my PhD in Persian Lit. What's that going to do for you? And he had been over the house like countless times. He liked, how social we were. He even had a couple of like Persian girlfriends. He means well. We have this analogy back home that if I was to walk around with a skirt, would that make me a woman? And the answer, of course, is no. Today, you can't say those stories because people actually would say yes. Maybe you're like going through this identity crisis, but all that aside. So this poor fellow imagined that if he was to hang out with Persians, his Western qualities would disappear, be erased or deleted, and then he would become Persian. Never happened. He's almost 40, still single. Kind of useless. But he has a PhD. So the answer to your question really is if you want to be hospitable, marry Myrna's son. You know, open door policy 24/7, 365 days a week, a year. You don't have much of an option, you know. And hopefully if you stay married with Myrna's son for the next like 50 years, one day you wake up and you realize, wow, most of the stuff inside you that were American made, they're all gone. And though you may be American on the outside, you're Mexican on the inside, or African on the inside, or Middle Eastern on the inside. So, yeah. I'm sorry. So. Yep.
I was just thinking about Leo's question about hospitality and the figure on the roof and doing much. And I just remember that one scene where the dad just manifests that one pregnant teacher to his house.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, have you ever been to Iran? Our poor people are very interesting, especially women. You know, they wear a hijab, a veil. So when the husband is dead, or he doesn't have a job, or maybe he has a job, but they don't really make enough money, she comes into the street, she sits on the ground, she covers her face so that she doesn't disrespect her family, her last name, her husband, her kids. And all you see is a hand coming out of this tiny little tent. And so we realize that in certain cultures, poverty also comes with social and cultural shame, that you try to preserve your reputation, your name, your stature in society as much as possible. You know, the way you speak, you don't come to class with your jammies. You know, just, who does that? You know, you don't come to class smelling like weed. Who does that? You know. So, anyways, let's move on. Tasha.
Yes, I have a question.
That was very forceful. It was very good. So in your household, you're the dominant force?
Sort of.
There you go. Good job. I mean, I think men just need to be on a leash. Would you agree?
No,
What do you mean?
I don't think.
Why?
Well,
Well, I wasn't really talking about like mature, intelligent men who are mindful and aware.
what's about the other?
It's the other like 99.9% of men. But forgive me, go ahead.
What do we owe future generations? What do we owe the future human population in this current life we're in right now?
So there are a couple of things. آنکه دندان دهد نان دهد. You're a mother, you worry about your kids, but you also worry about yourself. And you realize that you're attached to the future of two completely different people. One is you. You are a mother, yes. You are a wife, yes. You are a sister and you are a daughter. And you have obligations to all these other people. But there's also Tasha who once in a while looks herself in the mirror and says, what are you doing? At this point, moment in time, you're not a wife or a sister or a daughter or a mother. You're here how the house is clean, the food is made, you're standing in the middle of the living room, no one's here. What are you doing with your life? What have you been doing in your life? And you realize for that particular moment in time, kind of like Noah's Ark story, all humanity in your life disappears. And the only person remaining is just you. And the only person you care for and think about and worry about is just you. You have what we call an existential moment. You know, you don't care about your children and whether or not they're going to be fed. Which means that who gives you teeth? Tasha, it's God. And this particular saying comes from a religious tradition. You know, so it's not a debate as to whether God exists. That's other question. The person who gives you teeth is God. Okay? Anyone who gives you teeth will eventually provide bread. Okay? So it means if you're able to connect this to the Gospels, that look at the birds. You know, they don't go to Costco, come out with a cart with $5,000 worth of food. The birds just kind of just fly around. Once in a while they descend. You know, they sit on this, they sit on that. They're fed somehow, in some shape or form, in a very magical way. No bird ever goes hungry. They may get shot. They may hit the tree and die. They may get hit by a car, but they all get fed somehow. And so the saying is that if you're born, somehow you will survive. Okay? So at that particular moment in time, the only person's future that you're concerned for is your own. Hello. Then comes the more difficult aspect of the question, which is children. A 100 years ago, you'd probably marry your cousin. It was like your dad's, brother's son. Your dad is Christian, his brother is Christian. They come from the same family, they come from the same background, so there are no cultural differences. You don't really have to adjust too much. Everything is known. And when you walk into the street, you have one bulletin board out there, and it's like a sign of a cross. Everyone believes the same thing, talks the same way, walks the same way, everything's the same. Which means that just in case you guys get married and have children, for the most part, they're going to live in the same town, and die in the same town. They'll have kids because that's what people do. So what we have done for the past many, many thousands, if not millions of years, we tried to create a routine, certain sort of habits in thinking, in being, that it creates, at least for many of us, the illusion of security. I'm not talking about earthquakes and wars and famines. And we need that. You need to know. We had an instructor here some time ago. She used to teach communications. She was a very, very nice woman. She was a little older, a little sickly. And her classes would be canceled like every other day. So students didn't really know if, coming to Laney, the classroom door would be locked, unlocked, if she would show up, not show up. And after a while, the administrators would go through and say, if you want to retire, we can help you with that. Because it created such a chaotic environment for the students. Okay? So one of the things you need to understand that we've tried the best, even when it comes to like romantic relationships, marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, all these categories that they create, and we inject ourselves in these categories. We kind of define soon what we are and where we're going. I don't know if my daughter's going to come home and tell me if she's a boy or she still is a girl. I don't know. I don't know if she comes home, she's going to smell like weed. I don't know. I don't know if she's going to marry someone who speaks the Persian language or if she's completely mute. I don't know. I don't know if education is going to be the extension of the culture, and I don't know if the culture is going to be an extension of my family's culture. Because 50 years ago, your parents would say one thing to you, then you would go to society, society would reinforce that narrative, then you would go to school, school would also reinforce that narrative. And you realize that you have your parents, you have the culture, and you have education, all hand in hand, trying to reinforce a certain narrative. You are a Christian, you are a man, you are a woman, you are this, you are that. And for the most part, your future would be very predictable. You're going to marry a black man, and you're going to have 4 kids, and you're going to live in this particular environment. That was it. Today, the story is very, 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 very different. You don't really know what movie is going to attack your child's psyche. You don't really know what the teachers are going to say at school, you know. And so you realize that every pocket in the social environment has its own unique agenda. And so your kid is going to come home being 10 different people with 10 different desires, all conflicting. Add to it the powerhouse which you call capitalism, consumerism, which is there to suspend your intelligence. Your kids, Tasha, are this country's future customers. Your next question is customers of what? Well, look at the world of advertisement. What is being advertised to your kids? You have so little power. And I don't even know if having children these days is something that will benefit you or give you like 20 strokes. 50 years ago, the environment was much safer, much more predictable, you know. When I was in Iran and planes were just, you know, all over the sky and dropping bombs, we would run to some relative's house or a neighbor's house. My grandfather, on the other hand, he just stayed home. He said, we don't really know where the planes are going. We don't really know where the bombs are being dropped. You know, you may be running to your aunt's house, but the bomb may drop, you know, at her house. And not here. Why not just stay here then? And so you realize that when you have a lot of stuff going on around you, your future becomes very unpredictable because you don't have any power to control the external forces. So, hello. So your question about how to protect your children's future, was that your question? No, not really. What you leave behind for your kids?
Or what do we owe the next generation?
You can owe a lot, they won't do anything. Are you saving money?
Trying.
You know, by the time your kids turn to be like 25, 30, 40, they need a house. Unless this economy is completely shattered, they probably won't be able to afford it. So you know what you need to do? You need to buy a house for them. That's what you leave behind. You also want to make sure that they're not completely contaminated by the internet. So once you get rid of the technology, all your friends, they think like you, act like you, walk like you, quack like you. If any of them don't, well, dismiss them as well. Because the truth is, the most valuable thing that you need to leave behind for anyone really is health. Physical health, emotional health, psychological health, intellectual health. This is a diseased environment. People are trying. Parents care and parents are really, really concerned. The problem is, you know, without practical application, none of those things really matter. Now, we haven't even brought in the politicians into the picture yet. They care so little for people like you and I. So we're basically on our own, for the most part. But long story short, Tasha, I think we're all trying the best we can. We had a friend, David Long. Kelsey and I were his students some 30, 40, 50 years ago. Once he realized that his wife is pregnant, he left Sacramento, the city, and he went to Georgetown, population 300. Bought a tiny little cabin, 200 square feet. Lived there for 20 years or so. And once he retired and once his kids, went to school, got their PhDs and masters, went back to the city. But despite all of, and he was a philosopher, despite all of that, both of his daughters divorced. Did you see that? It's just, what can you do? What can you do? Brett? Well, you need to buy them a house. Like a fixer-upper somewhere. Far away from Oakland.
But the idea of power in my head and the difference, if there is a difference in power, just like power tendencies of men and women.
Men and women?
Yeah, I guess it's very different. It seems like we talk about human nature very generally, but there in some aspects there can be because of
Imagine that you and I are in a relationship. Can you imagine that? Okay, thank you. Now imagine that I am the woman in the relationship. And my name is Amira. Can you imagine that? Long hair, nice body. Can you imagine that? How am I looking? And since I'm looking really good, what are we doing? Your mind needs to be cleaned. So, I see you talking to Isabel back there. That's Isabel. That's Rhett. And one day I come home and I realize that you have invited Isabel to the house. And the two of you are not like in the kitchen, sitting at the table drinking coffee and talking about philosophy. You're in the bedroom, Rhett. Forgive me, Isabel. And you guys are talking about the existence of God. On the bed. On the bed. In the bed, on the bed, underneath the bed. And you are both baptized. You're both naked. That's the best way to have a conversation about whether or not God exists. I mean, you and I are married, right? And I see you with her. My first question as a woman to you, I mean, there are lots of different components, but I look at you and say, are you in love with her? You say, no. I'm really sorry. Forgive me. It'll take me some time, but eventually I will forgive but not forget. And we'll continue with that relationship. Am I angry? Yes. Am I jealous? Yes. But as long as I know that emotionally you're not involved with it, we're just two bodies grinding against one another, after some time I'll recover and then move on. This is not always so, but for the most part. Now let's change the scenario a little. That, your wife, I'm sleeping with Fuke over there. When you catch us in action, you don't really care if I'm physically or emotionally involved with Fuke. The very fact that I'm physically with him, that in itself brings about a good amount of anger. And there is a 99.999% chance that our relationship will be broken forever. And you realize something really interesting, that when it comes to something like jealousy or anger, for women it's emotional, and for men it's physical. Yeah. And then if I was to take this a bit more, look at it more philosophically, I would say the following. When you look at the Old Testament, when you look at the Quran, when you look at all the sages that come from India, from China, you sit back and you wonder, why is it that you have all these men like leaving the city life, walking into the forest, trying to figure out if there is meaning, if there is God, if there is truth. How come you don't encounter very many women out there? I mean, most of the Old Testament is just about men. Once in a while you encounter some wisdom tradition that's rooted in a woman, but for the most part it's all men who are confused, men who are unhappy, men who are dissatisfied with the world and with just a physical life, and they kind of leave everything and they go to the forest questing after God or something. Okay. It may be the wrong conclusion, but as far as I can tell, it seems that when it comes to power, it's not that men don't enjoy physical power, they do so very much. That's why we have wars. Women desire to be grounded physically, whereas men want to be grounded intellectually or spiritually. That for women, having nice tables, nice chairs, nice house, nice this is a huge deal. For men, it's not so much about that. It's about power, it's about control, it's about domination. And power is abstract. It's like digital money. And it doesn't really exist except in your head. Yeah. So that's why, should you be in a relationship, you need to have a good job that makes lots of money. And anyone else? Eva? Cassie? Yeah.
There's a question. But solid reason. What is the value or meaning of philosophical life, especially during periods when there's a lot of chaos? They're in their immediate sort of environment.
I think these are different stages that someone goes through. When you have children, you buy them all these toys. You know, they take you to Target, and they force you to buy all these ridiculous toys. And for them, it's valuable. It's the only thing that they enjoy doing. Occupies them, you know. At a certain point, they outgrow, you know, those particular toys. And maybe in solitary reflection, they sit back and they say, did I really force my parents to do A, B, C, D for me? Look at all these toys that I have. They're completely useless. I think you're 18 or 19 or 20. You kind of look around and you realize you don't really want to be like your dad, like your mom. You don't want to be like your instructors. They're all idiots. You know, you want to be a bit more creative, authentic. I mean, that's the gift that is given to you freely when you're young. You look at the political world, the social world, and you say, man, why did adults create such huge rubbish everywhere? And so you kind of, the word in Arabic, qiyam or qom, hello Amir, which means that you revolt, you rebel. You know, you stand up and you fight the system. And that's what you do when you're a kid. You know, you don't like anything that you see out there created by the adult world. And so you go on this philosophical quest. You go to Yosemite, you know, you live in your tent, you become homeless, you do like social experiments. I want to know how it feels to live in a tent. I want to know how it feels to like beg for food, beg for money from people. At a certain point in your life, you realize that, well, you know, you've done enough of that. You've sat and you've read enough books. It's like you've dated enough losers. You're done with that. And at a certain point, you become like a bee. You sit somewhere and you say, okay, you know, I've taken enough juices from the flowers I've sat on. I want to go somewhere and I want to vomit. And you vomit all the stuff out and that becomes honey. That becomes your wisdom. Now, if you happen to be very, 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 very unlucky, wisdom remains abstract. Wisdom remains an intellectual activity. You go on the stage and you talk about how life is filled with suffering, like the Buddha. Okay? Or you become like a Jesus Christ. You know, that man does not live by bread alone. You know, why store your treasures down here? I mean, it's just a very abstract, stupid philosophy of life. It's very immature. And then you realize, well, you know, let me look at like 99.9% of the human population. How is it that they live? From the moment they wake up to the time they go to sleep, it's about food, money, shelter, just physical security. No one's got time or the desire or the interest to look for the kingdom of God. Once in a while, maybe. But to invite the entire human race to go on this quest for the kingdom of God within, that's just stupid. So you need someone like Moses. Moses is very, very practical. You know, he takes the juice, he sits somewhere and he says, okay, what is workable? What is applicable? I mean, you can believe in God all that you want, but once you have kids, I mean, the kids bring you from paradise down here. They say, look at the public schools in Oakland. Jesus is not going to come and save you. God has given you a brain. God damn it, use it. And so this idea about this philosophical quest or whatever wisdom, you know, that you can gain from it, at a certain point, you gain some maturity and you say, okay, all the books I have read, all the thoughts I have thought about, all the ideas, do they have any practical application? Are they usable? You know, I have all these tools at my house. If I don't know how to use them, I mean, I want to like build a house and have all the right tools. I just don't know how to use them. What's the use of having them? And you realize for the first time in many, many, many years, you have all these tools and say, you know what? I want to learn how to use these tools. So for the past many thousands of years, going all the way back to Gilgamesh, 5,000 years old. Okay? Now, Gilgamesh comes from an oral tradition, which means that it's probably been around for about 10, 15, 20, 30,000 years. Okay? What is Gilgamesh desiring? Well, he wants justice. He wants immortality. He wants friendship. He wants beauty. These are things we've been wrestling with for the past many, many thousands of years. Now, all right, so you want to get married. Well, there are lots of people who are very attractive on the outside. But after a while, you realize, yes, I got married to Angelina Jolie. That didn't work out too well, despite her physical attraction. Yes, I got married to Rihanna. She's also very attractive. She's very beautiful, and yet that beauty didn't make the relationship survive. Maybe I should look for a different kind of beauty. And all of a sudden you realize 5,000 years you've been hanging on to this physical beauty, but in a practical level, it just doesn't work. And consider voting for politicians. It's a very abstract philosophy of life in the sense that you don't study society, you don't study the tech companies, you don't study what's happening behind closed doors, what the agenda is. You don't really understand how politicians look at human beings, normal commoners, You think that they're all there for justice and fairness and this and that, right? And you vote a few times only to realize you get backstabbed all the time. At a certain point, a culture revolts. And the moment you revolt, you're saying, you know what, I'm done with this abstract philosophy. Voting for these goons, it just doesn't work. The unhappy part of bringing stuff down from paradise and applying it to down here, physical, like everyday life, is that 99.9% of the New Testament, it's garbage. I mean, it's good for a few hours in a church on a Sunday. It's good once in a while we want to give a few bucks to a homeless person. That's wonderful. It's not going to pay rent. It's not going to pay for your food. It's not going to do anything for you. Except in moments of crisis, you can just go there and God can babysit you for 5 hours. But eventually you will have to go out and you will have to deal with the complexities of society. Now, if your question is, I've done all this philosophy, now at this stage in my life, I want to know whether or not it's been useful. Well, the way I see this, Cassie, is the following. I manipulate students and I push them towards getting their master's in philosophy. They have a love affair with a set of ideas for the next 5, 6, 7 years. At a certain point, I say, listen, you got to get a job. You got to make money. You got to buy a house. You got to get married. And if a student happens to be female, you got to have children. Because remember, everything has a certain shelf life. Abstract philosophical ideas, you can have fun with them for the first 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Once the intensity goes away, you come down. And in coming down, you say, okay, what should I do with my physical life? I go to class, I talk all this talk, I go home and my life is this way or that way. How do I bring the lion and the lamb to lie together peacefully? And the truth is, well, you need to be very, very rational, very intelligent, very articulate, very objective. You must also be very knowledgeable. You must know how to use wisdom in a very practical way. You only love Jesus or you only love Buddha because you don't apply his ideas to life. The only way we apply these ideas is, someone pushes you around, you have no power over them. So you say, you know what, I'm going to forgive them. That's great. That's a great philosophy of life to have. But in the long run, you're still going to get paid $30 an hour. And that's not enough for a life. Ultimately, the point is there are moments in life where you need to be like Jesus. You need to be passive, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need to not care, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there are moments in life where you need to be like Joseph. Yeah, like Moses. You need to be active. You need to be a soldier. And it's tough. You and I had a conversation this morning. Yeah. If there is someone in our life who's now distracted with other forms of entertainment, don't call them. Don't talk to them. They're useless. All of us have certain agendas in life. I mean, she wants to protect your kids. If she knows that I like to smoke and I like to drink and she doesn't want her kids to be exposed to that, it should be an idiot to invite me just because she just read the Bible a couple days ago. I mean, she really needs to be an idiot, preferring God over her kids. A wise woman would say, you know what? I love Amir. I care for him. First obligation, my kids and their future. And despite how much she may care for me, she's never going to invite me. Now that's a good piece of wisdom to have inside you. Good for you.
But I feel like the more you enforce that, don't drink alcohol or like don't smoke, the more that the kids are gonna want to try it.
You're absolutely right. Parents have tried for the past many millions of years. I don't really know how it works.
Well, I speak from my own experience.
Sure.
Growing up, my mom was alcohol and smoking, right? So when I got into high school and my friend offered it to me, I said no at first.
Yeah.
I went to school, I tried, but then I just found out I didn't like it. I just stopped doing it. So I feel like if you let them try it and it's not in their preference, or I know that there's a chance they might get addicted, but I feel like if we just let them try it and hurry up and die down.
You are 125% right. You tell your daughter, don't talk to boys. Don't look at boys. Boys are like poison. But the truth is, to be attracted is very organic. You don't know how far you should push, how high your volume should be, if you should spank them physically, emotionally, you just don't know. All I know is that I had a friend, Saeed. He was a political prisoner back home. He escaped through going through the mountains, Pakistan, landed in India, then went to France, then came to here as a political asylum. One day his daughter went to him and says, my friends keep telling me, I should smoke with them, pot. He doesn't come from that culture. He doesn't come from a pot smoking culture. His parents were extremely religious. So was he to some extent, very political. And so he studied the culture really, really well. I mean, that's what most immigrants basically do. What's good in America, what's bad in America, what profits you, what harms you. And so he understood that in lots of gatherings, like 18, 19-year-olds, they include substances in their world of drugs that could actually be quite hazardous. So he looks at his daughter and says, so you want to give this a try, huh? She says, yeah. So he goes somewhere and he buys some good stuff. And he says, you know what, let's you and I try it together. Because he had to make a decision. If he says no, she's going to experiment. If he was to say yes, it would mean that he doesn't really care, she can go do whatever. So he said, let's do this in a very controlled environment. And she did it a couple times with him, her father. She came to realize, very much like you, it's not something she enjoys doing. So she's never touched it. And then the next phase was, my friends keep telling me that they want to drink. And so he said, okay, well, she can go to a party, drink some Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid may have this and that in it, and I may get a cold that she's dead. Maybe we should do this again together. So she has a taste, soft liquor, hard liquor, and wine. She doesn't like any of them. It could also backfire. She could say, I really like this stuff. So, I think one of the unfair things in life is that parents eventually have no choice but to become Republicans, in the sense that they have no choice but to become conservative, because life has touched them, pushed them, bullied them. They know what works to some extent, they know what doesn't work. When a kid comes home and says, I want to drop out of school, well, your mom can't be open-minded. and say, well, son, I'm so glad that you're so creative. There's a good chance that your dad is going to scream at you and punch you in the face. Rightly so, because they're worried. They know the value of money and the difficulty of paying rent and mortgage every single month. So going back to what we talked about earlier, I think parents just have it tough. Everything is a shot in the dark. You could send your kids to private school, and they may turn out junky. You may send your kids to public schools, and they may turn out to be saints. So who the hell knows? But if you can, just listen to your parents.
I do try.
Yeah. I mean, if you can, 110%. Just put yourself on pause for the first 25, 30 years. And by the time you get to be 30, man, you will reap the benefits. You say, man, the only problem is this. If you kind of go back to the Gospel of Luke and read the prodigal son, by the time you're 30, because you've listened to your parents, every single thing that they have said, you have a PhD and you are 30, but you have no life experience. That makes you stupid. The flip side is you haven't listened to your parents, you've gone out there, you've been burnt by life. Maybe, like a good bee, you sit somewhere, you vomit out all the experiences, and you learn something from them. That makes you wise. But your wisdom has given your parents 5 strokes, 2 heart attacks. 5 are dead on the wayside. Was it worth it? I don't really know. So either side, there are some benefits and there are some harms. But I would say, listen to your mom and dad 110%, if they're relatively decent. It is true you have a PhD, it is true you're stupid, but at a certain point you'll probably get married or have a companion. He or she will teach you a few things. And that's all you need. Yeah? Does that?
I think last class you were talking about our hunger for food and like surviving, and that reminded me of there's a movie called The Alabama Solution about the prison riots in Alabama in 2022, and they all stopped working as a form of protest, all the prisoners. But at some point they kind of cracked because they weren't getting food, and the riot leader said, "You guys could go 20 years without seeing your family, maybe even longer without having sex, but can't go one day without eating." And I'm wondering, is kind of reminding me of like these spiritual leaders. They go on these quests, they starve themselves. Why do we need to do that? Like it seems like it tests our strength to let ourselves starve of physical things, spiritual.
Have you ever fasted?
Very.
So, up to the age of, I think, like 16 or 17, I would fast once in a while. And that was like cultural. My mom would fast, my dad would fast. You walk into the streets, some shops are closed because of the fasting month. Some people just fast because they have a certain desire or prayer, and they assume that for the gods to listen, they can't eat any food or drink any water from sunrise to sunset, and hopefully God will kind of watch, will look, will see, and then hopefully they'll reward them in some shape or form. At a certain point in my own life, and forgive me for making it personal, when I met my own teacher, one of the things that all teachers do is that they brainwash you. It's no different than going out on a date. When you take someone on a date, what you want to do is you brainwash them. You want to kind of tell them that you're the best thing that ever happened to them. You know, that with them you'll be happy, without them you'll be miserable. And even though, you know, you have 50 other dates out there waiting for you, no one's going to match them. They're the best, okay? And so that's what everybody does. Everybody tries to kind of prove that they are the best of the best of the best out there. So once I met this man, he brainwashed me in the sense that he said, you know what, Amir, you sing, that's okay. You play tennis, that's okay. You know, you do A, B, C, D, all that is okay, but why not like do philosophy? And he wasn't in education. He had a deli in Sacramento. And the more I hung out with him, the more I became interested in his ideas. And at a certain point I said, you know what, I want to be like him. You know, some people want to be like Eminem, some people want to be like Snoop Dogg, some people want to be like Brad Pitt, some people want to be like Magnus Carlsen, some people like Malcolm X. So it depends who you worship. So I desired to be like him. And then the fasting month came about. And one of the things you understand, depending on, you know, how you want to do philosophy, and that depends on who influences you in doing philosophy. Some people do philosophy by reading a lot of books. You know, some people do philosophy by reading a lot of books, but they do it with a good amount of intense emotions, and that's devastating. You know, it's like people have sex. Some people just have sex, and some people have sex with a lot of love. You know, those who have sex with a lot of love have a lot of attachment, a lot of emotions, a lot of expectations, they're very future oriented. You know, they're like body, mind, soul invested in this like physical activity. Those who are just doing a hit and run, physically they're there, but emotionally and mentally, they're not there at all. It's like you're just having sex with a mannequin, okay? One of the things about philosophy, which means love for wisdom, you kind of come to realize that, you know, you can't get wisdom by reading books, and you can't love books. It doesn't work that way. That there is something about you, Tasha, that's not physical. I mean, think about that for a moment. There is something about you, there is another Tasha inside you that you can't just yet see or feel or experience. Once in a while you can intuit it. It comes about and disappears. And the reason why you're always in the presence of the physical Tasha is because most of the things you think about, most of your feelings, most of your past and present and future revolve around the physical Tasha. Tasha for money, Tasha for food, Tasha for sex, Tasha for her kids, Tasha for her husband, Tasha for herself, Tasha for her guests. And at a certain point you say to yourself, I want to divorce this Tasha. The idea that man does not live by bread alone, and if you were to kind of change that language to fit modern sensibilities, a human being does not live by bread alone. And when you replace man with human being, you can be gay, trans, whatever. You know, it fits you because you're a human being. At a certain point, you come to a place where you say, you know what? It seems like I have a roof over my head. It used to be a house, then turned into a home. And though I walk in it, I feel homeless. There is something about it that is longing, yearning for something else. And then at a certain point you say, why do I need to feed my physical body all the time? I want to starve it. I want to starve it because I don't want to pay attention to it anymore. I am disgusted. The Greeks were involved in this war with this country. And the wives went to the politicians and says, you know, this war is unjust. Our men are being killed for no good reason. You need to stop the war. The politicians said no, for their own reasons. When some of the men came home to just take a break and then go back into the field, and what is it that men want when they come home after like 5 months of being in the desert? Well, they want intimacy, i.e. sex. You know, not so much sex with love, just sex. You know, they want to release a good amount of tension. The women said no. No sex. No sex. Men remain disgusted with the war, with their women, with themselves, with their life. They refuse to go back into the battlefield. The war stopped. There are moments you see yourself as a different sort of an animal, and you will not like it. You will not like yourself as, have you seen that show on TV, The Young Sheldon? You've heard of it. So it's a very small community of people, small town. They're very, very religious. But they got 3 kids, and it's tough taking care of the kids. Sheldon is a genius. I don't know if he's, autistic or not, but he's just a genius, right? He's like 2 years old, but he's going to Yale, right? And the father is a football coach. The mom works at the church as well as a housewife. And you add the politics of life together, you say, man, what is left of me? And they're sitting at the dinner table once in a while, and they chit-chat about whether or not the marriage is going to last. Not because they don't love one another, because life just drags you in dirt. This woman has fantasies about one of the pastors in the church. Why? And when her husband says, let's have sex, she says no. I mean, that's like fasting. I don't want to be touched by you, but I want to be touched by him. In other words, you don't want food that comes from the earth. You want food that comes from heaven. Okay? And you encounter yourself being a different animal, desiring different things. How that happens, it's part of it has to do with your own growth and maturity over time, what you've been exposed to, who manipulates you, exploits you. And it doesn't mean it's always negative or for bad reasons. I mean, when Jesus Christ walks to Nazareth, what is he doing? He wants customers. He wants people to turn away from the Jewish tradition, right? And turn into the direction of Jesus Christ. That's what he does. All of us are salespeople. All of us are, without exception. The other thing you need to kind of understand about fasting is this. If you don't have food, it's like your car not having any gas. It's not going to move. You want to raise your hand and ask a question because you think that your question is meaningful. That requires energy. Don't give your body any food. You may have the desire to raise your hand, but all of a sudden this part of you says, you know what, I just don't give a shit. And when you starve your body, something very interesting happens. You will start not giving a shit about any part of life. And when you don't give a shit about life, you know what is given to you? Freedom. You don't care about politics, about your wife, about your kids, about your husband, about food, about anything. That's called your desert life. And you're looking for a nourishment from somewhere. You kind of call it spirituality or religiosity, whatever. Leah. Hello. The point of fasting? Have you had a companion ever? Were you ever dumped? What? No one ever broke up with you? You're still in it? You broke up or he broke up or she? So let me reverse the story a little bit. Imagine that you and I are in a relationship, okay? I love you and you love me. At a certain point, I come home and I say, I don't want to be with you anymore. And one of the things about a relationship is that you and I sit, talk about marriage, talk about children, buying a house together, having a life. Okay? So when I say I don't want to be with you, it also means I don't want to marry you, I don't want to have kids with you, I don't want to buy a house with you, okay? I don't want both of our names to be on various bills. I want no part of you in any part of my life. Are you going to be able to sleep well at night? No. Are you going to be heartbroken? Are you going to be angry? Are these like good things for you to have? No sleeping, no eating, always being sad and depressed and angry? Of course not. So you know what you start looking for? I want to find a way where I don't think about Amir, feel about Amir. And what you're saying is, I want to fast. Give me something that I can eat so the image of Amir does not come into my mind as often. Fasting is about that. It's like you weigh 10,000 pounds, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I hate the way I look. What do? You begin to fast. We call it diet. And why do you go on a diet? Because you want to have a beautiful body. Because you want people to look at you. Because you want elements of beauty. You want to inspire people. You don't need to think about fasting as some religious thing. We do it all the time. I mean, look, you may not like me. You may not like this class. But you've come to understand a few things. You need this class to graduate. As you're sitting here, you're fasting from sleep, from hanging out with your friends, watching TV, being in the sun, watching the ducks make out. That's fasting. And why are you fasting? Why do you put yourself in an environment that is so harmful to your soul? Well, because you are a human being, intelligent human being who thinks about her future. I don't want to stay in Oakland. I don't want to keep repeating, going to Laney. I want to graduate. So you fast. You put some things on pause. Okay? You say pause to having fun, pause to sun, pause to coffee, whatever, in being asleep in my bed. You come to class. You suffer for about an hour and 10 minutes. When the suffering is finished, then you go to Pete's Coffee and you reward yourself with a cup of coffee. That's what fasting is. It's about discipline. It's also about your understanding that if you want certain parts of your life to work well, you need to make sure that you stay away from certain things. If, for example, you no longer want to drink, you need to stay away from friends who drink. That's fasting. If you realize that you're watching too much porn, and that exploits the way you think about men or women, you only look at them as objects, but you really at this stage you want to fall in love, look at someone as a human being that you can love passionately. You say, you know what? I no longer wish to watch porn. So there is always this component of reward that's involved. I like to get there. I am here. For me to get there, I have to sacrifice A, B, C, D. So you sacrifice. And all the stuff takes place in time. That if you want to get to a better place, you need to give up certain things. How old are you? 18. You're old enough to be married and have like 5 dozen kids. Okay. Let's say at the age of 18, you say, you know what? I want to get married. Well, you need to go on a fasting. And the way you do it is by saying, okay, what sort of a man, let's just say you're heterosexual, what sort of a man is good for life? Long life. For the next 50 years. Do I need someone who's educated? Maybe your answer is yes. Do I want someone who drinks and smokes? Well, if you want to have children, maybe not. And you realize that the moment you say, I want educated men, about 80% of the men are just trashed. That's fasting. Okay? Because you care about your future kids, you don't want a man who smokes and drinks, another 10% is added, which means that 90% of men now are trashed. That's what it is. Is it time to go? Thank God. It's good to see all of you. Oh, remember, we have no class on Wednesday, so you can sleep. Okay, take care, man. It's good to see you.
Hi, Professor.